I hope this will continue to our neighbors to integrate the whole East Africa as one family.
Ethiopia just did something the world didn't see coming. Inside the parliament in Addis Ababa, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed looked his lawmakers in the eye and said 6 simple words. Asterisk, our economy is growing without foreign loans. Asterisk, it sounded calm, almost ordinary, but those words carried the weight of a century. For decades, Africa has been told it can't stand without foreign aid. Yet here was Ethiopia not begging, not borrowing, just building. It wasn't just a speech, it was a shift. A shift from dependence to dignity, from waiting for permission to taking control. And if you listen closely, you can hear it, a new rhythm rising from Addis Ababa and echoing across the continent. It whispers, asterisk, Africa doesn't owe anyone anymore. Asterisk, but what made this miracle possible? It didn't start with a grand announcement or a global summit. It began quietly, with one decision, one reform, and one leader's belief that Africa can walk on its own feet. When Abiy Ahmed told Parliament that Ethiopia's economy was growing without loans, most of the world didn't notice. But for those who understand Africa's financial history, that moment was electric. For decades, Africa's economy has been treated like a patient on life support, always in crisis, always dependent on the next rescue loan. So when Ethiopia stood up and said, "We're fine," it didn't just challenge economics, it challenged the world's psychology. It told the global system that Africa is not a project, it's a power. Now here's the jaw-dropping part. Over the past 6 years, Ethiopia cut its foreign debt by more than 80%, reducing it from $23 billion to just $4.5 billion. Let that sink in. A reduction so huge that economists around the world stopped and asked, asterisk, how did they do that? Asterisk, it didn't happen overnight. It happened through belief, patience, and a quiet kind of stubbornness, the kind that says, asterisk, we'll suffer a bit if we must, but we won't kneel anymore. Asterisk, Ethiopia stopped taking new loans, restructured its old ones, and invested in its own capacity instead of relying on outsiders. It was painful, slow, and often unglamorous work, but it paid off. Because this isn't just one country balancing its books, it's an entire continent rewriting its story. Across Africa, people are watching Ethiopia and thinking, maybe we can do that too. This isn't just finance, it's freedom. Around 2019, Abiy Ahmed and his team realized they couldn't keep borrowing forever. So they launched something revolutionary, the Homegrown Reform Program. The idea was simple but radical: no more imported solutions, no more foreign babysitting. Ethiopia would design its own path, using its own resources and people. Of course, the world doubted it. Western economists called it too ambitious. Some predicted Ethiopia's economy would collapse without IMF money. But it didn't. The country climbed, slowly, painfully, but steadily. In a few years, Ethiopia's national income rose from about $2.9 billion to $17.3 billion. That's a 5-fold increase. And it happened without new loans. The government began collecting fair taxes, investing in domestic production, and spending smarter. They poured over $440 billion around $7.6 billion, into subsidies to protect ordinary citizens during the reforms. Prices for fuel, fertilizer, and public salaries were stabilized so people could survive the transition. This wasn't charity, it was sovereignty. Real reform doesn't abandon people, it protects them. And yes, the temptation to borrow was always there. There's always a lender whispering, "We can help you," especially when times are tough. But Ethiopia kept saying, asterisk, no thanks. We'll figure it out. Asterisk, that quiet refusal might end up being one of the most important moments in modern African history. Because when one country proves that it's possible to grow without debt, it doesn't just inspire others, it exposes the system that said you couldn't. Maybe that's why Ethiopia's success makes some people uncomfortable. Because for the first time in decades, Africa isn't asking for approval. It's showing results. And once that happens, there's no turning back. Ethiopia's journey wasn't a revolution of protests and slogans. It was a silent rebellion fought in boardrooms, spreadsheets, and late-night policy meetings. A quiet, disciplined war for dignity. Abiy Ahmed's philosophy was simple. Asterisk, we must grow on what we have. Asterisk, many in the West dismissed Ethiopia's reforms as reckless. They said the economy was too fragile, too poor, too dependent. But Ethiopia didn't collapse. It adapted. It learned to breathe without foreign oxygen. Because money isn't just numbers, it's power. And Ethiopia decided to reclaim that power. For the first time, the country's budget reflects independence. Growth is being defined in Addis Ababa, not in Washington or Paris. As Abiy put it, we can't call ourselves free if we're still paying interest on our freedom. While the numbers tell one story, the people tell another. Mothers struggling with food prices, farmers waiting for fertilizer, teachers walking long distances to work. They're all part of this transformation. The government knows the pain is real, but it also knows the purpose is greater. You see, Africa's debt wasn't just financial, it was psychological. Colonialism may have ended, but economic control never left. The same foreign powers that once ruled with armies now ruled with loans. The chains just changed shape. Every development loan came with conditions: what industries you could build, what resources you could sell, how you could spend your money. That wasn't freedom. It was control dressed up as generosity. Ethiopia decided to break those chains. It stopped accepting deals that looked generous on paper but came with invisible strings. And when it did, the world's response was predictable: panic. Suddenly, headlines called Ethiopia's independence risky. Western analysts warned of instability. Funny, isn't it? When Africa borrows too much, they call it irresponsible. When Africa borrows nothing, they call it dangerous. You can't win with them, and Ethiopia realized it didn't need to. This wasn't about revenge or ego. It was about dignity. About finally saying, we've paid enough. For centuries, Africa has paid in gold, oil, diamonds, labor, and silence. Every resource pulled from its soil was supposed to buy progress. But all it bought was dependency. So when Ethiopia slashed its debt and said, "We're done borrowing," it wasn't just about economics, it was spiritual. It was an act of liberation, because this isn't just about breaking debt. It's about breaking a spell, the one that made Africans believe they couldn't rise without permission. And maybe that's what truly scares the world. Whenever Africa takes a step toward real independence, the world suddenly gets concerned. Concerned about what? About losing control. When Ethiopia declared it was growing without loans, you could almost hear the confusion in foreign boardrooms. How? They asked. But Ethiopia wasn't isolating itself, it was freeing itself. The global financial system has long worked like a spider's web, the IMF and World Bank at the center, and developing nations caught in the threads. Each loan pulled Africa tighter into the system. Now Ethiopia's burning through those threads, and the web is trembling. Because if Ethiopia can escape, others might follow. Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, what happens when they too say we're done? That's what terrifies the old order. Not Ethiopia's failure, but its success. Because when Africa stops being developing, it starts being deciding. And make no mistake, this isn't just an economic shift. It's a psychological earthquake. For so long, Africa's dependence gave others a sense of importance. Donors felt noble. Lenders felt powerful. Economists felt superior. Everyone had a role except Africa.